It needs to be very clear right away that asking questions in philosophy is not only necessary, but it's actually a form of flattery. So imagine if you were trying to share a position with someone about something that you really cared about, right? It could be political, it could be religious, it could be anything, right? So pick something that you're passionate about, right? That you really care about, and imagine telling someone what you believe and why you believe it. What would it mean if they did not ask you any questions about the thing that you just shared with them? Wouldn't that suggest that perhaps that they're not very interested in what you said? That they don't want to know anymore, or that it's not even worth following up with further information about, right? If I have something I care about, I don't know about you, but I could talk about it all day. I would want to answer any and every question I possibly could. And if it were something as meaningful to me as, say, a political or a religious belief, I would want to be able to have an answer prepared for any question I might receive, right? I would be rather embarrassed if I were so passionate about something and someone asked me a question and I was like, oh, I don't even know. I hadn't even thought about that, right? That doesn't really express the kind of passion that I think I would have had for that subject, right? So again, the basic idea here, something we should learn and hopefully internalize through this class, is that asking questions is an important necessity, but that it's a good thing, right? That we're doing this and we're going to learn how to do this in a respectful manner that is effective and progressive and moving towards something. All right, so what are we moving towards? Well, like we said, right, looking at somewhat what we might call ordinary beliefs, right, those things that we don't necessarily question all the time. So a philosophical belief, right, is going to be something that is sort of like the foundation for our ordinary beliefs. So for example, right, a common contemporary debate is about the ethics of eating meat, right? You'll see I use this example quite a bit just because there's I think most people are familiar with the general arguments on either side of the debate, or there are many sides of the debate, I guess. And so the idea here, right, is that you might think that eating meat is fine, right? Or you might think that eating meat is morally impermissible. But, right, the philosophical question is why, right? What is it that makes eating meat fine, morally permissible, or not okay, right? Morally impermissible, right? So that philosophical question of why in this case will get at the philosophical belief, right? That thing that might underline why you think it's okay to do one thing rather than another, right? So for instance, if I think that it's morally permissible to eat meat, that might be based on a philosophical belief I have that, say, animal pain or suffering is of less moral value than human pain and suffering, right? Or if I think that animals should not be eaten, that might be based in a philosophical belief that I think that any being that suffers is equally valuable, right? So there are different arguments I could take, right? What we're getting at, again, is not just the point of arguing with each other and, oh, I want you to change your mind and you're right and you're wrong. The idea is to really understand why we think what we do, right? And so this, again, is something worth clarifying. When I went to college, my parents warned me, about being brainwashed by teachers and things. I want to make very clear that I am not, and don't take this the wrong way, I am not concerned with what your beliefs are, right? In the sense that you can believe whatever you'd like, right? That you're entitled to that. But I am concerned with why you have certain beliefs over others, in the sense that I want to help you understand what makes a good reason for accepting something versus what doesn't count as a sufficient reason, right? And learning how to assess those things is really useful to us in so many different facets of our lives, but because it can touch on such personal beliefs, right, like some of the things I've mentioned and some that you'll see throughout the class, right, people can, again, often be very concerned, right, or hesitant, right, to question those things. It's not something we've unfortunately been encouraged to do as adults, right? Kids ask lots of questions, but then we as adults get annoyed with them, right? So we're thinking here, right, we're hoping to get to the truth of those philosophical or fundamental or foundational beliefs, right? Is it actually true that a human life, right, matters more than a non-human life, right? Is that actually true? And if so, again, why is that true, right? What is it that makes human life more valuable? I would have to, find something about humans that accounts for all human beings. So, for instance, I couldn't say, for instance, that the thing that makes human beings superior to animals is language, right? Why couldn't I say that? Well, not all human beings have the capacity for language. And a lot of animals actually have quite impressive capacities for language. They can communicate across species. Humans can't even do that. So if I were to use something like that, you could see that if I were to follow it through, right, if I really understood the implications of my belief, then I would arrive at an inconsistency, right? I would actually, I should, if it's about language, think that humans are superior. That animals are superior, right, to humans. So you can see that the idea here is that we want to make sure that we don't hold inconsistent beliefs, or at least, I don't know about you, I don't want to go about in the world thinking things that are incompatible with each other, right? I want to believe true things. I want to make sure that I can be successful in the world, and I can only do that by understanding the world as it is. All right, and so what we are hopefully also able to uncover throughout this process are biases that we have. And, there's lots of discussion on different types of biases